In the desolate town of Windingbrook, a dark secret was hidden. No one expected that beneath the facade of innocence lurked a monster terrorizing its residents. The story began many years ago when the seemingly peaceful life of a young boy, Thomas, was brutally disrupted. His past was filled with pain and cruelty. Thomas was abused and tormented by his father, leaving him feeling worthless and powerless. Living in constant fear gave rise to monstrous emotions that began to grow within him. Thomas's early childhood was once full of innocence and joy, but it quickly turned into a dark nightmare. He was born in the impoverished part of the town as the only child of his parents, Annie and Robert. His mother was a gentle and loving woman who dedicated herself to her son. However, she tragically departed from this world. When Thomas was merely 5 years old, his father succumbed to alcoholism and became aggressive. The family lived in perpetual fear of his outbursts of anger. Annie, Thomas's mother, tried to protect her son, and often found herself alone with him when her husband was absent or came home drunk. However, fate was unkind to Annie, as she became the victim of a tragic accident. One fateful night, while returning home, she was attacked by a group of criminals. They attempted to rob her, and when Annie resisted, one of them struck her in the head, causing a fatal injury. Thomas was too young to fully comprehend the tragedy, but he felt the immense loss of his mother. This event changed him forever. After Annie's death, Thomas's father descended deeper into alcoholism and violence, further exacerbating the boy's suffering. Without his mother's care, Thomas became increasingly withdrawn. He lost trust in people and started spending much of his time in solitude. At school, he struggled to connect with his peers and led a solitary life. Nevertheless, he cherished memories of his mother and the love she gave him. As a child, he believed she was his guardian angel watching over him from heaven. These memories offered some comfort, but also reinforced his belief that the world was full of cruelty and evil. This marked the beginning of Thomas's terrifying past, which would soon give rise to a series of brutal murders, and the entire town would live in fear of an elusive killer. Growing up in a toxic environment, Thomas gradually lost touch with reality. His thirst for murderous revenge seemed like the only way to escape the suffering he endured. He despised the people who appeared to lead normal lives while he was a victim of cruel circumstances. His first victim fell prey during a mysterious series of murders that shook the town. People began to fear, not knowing who lurked in the darkness. No one suspected that such a small, innocent child could become such a monster. Thomas's transformation into a heartless killer was gradual and cruel. His first murder occurred in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood where elderly townspeople lived. He started hunting innocent old women, seeing them as a form of revenge for his mother's loss. His first victim was Mrs. Mildred, one of the most kind-hearted neighbors. She was the only one who attempted to connect with young Thomas after his mother's death. Unfortunately, her kindness was inconsequential against his outbursts of rage. On that fateful evening, Thomas was plagued with intense emotions and frustrations that seemed beyond a child his age. When Mrs. Mildred invited him to her house for tea, she had no idea she was in grave danger. With dead eyes fixed on her, Thomas asked Mrs. Mildred about his mother's love. When she tried to console him, the young boy suddenly produced a small knife hidden in his pocket. Before Mrs. Mildred could comprehend the situation, Thomas clenched his hand and swiftly ended her life. After committing his first murder, Thomas knew he had to cover his tracks. He hid Mrs. Mildred's body under an old curtain and fled outside, careful not to leave any traces of blood behind. He concealed his knife and clothes in a crevice between the wall and an old tool shed. His shocking murder left the town in terror and disarray. The police couldn't suspect that a child could be connected to such a brutal killing. Thomas remained undetected, and his ability to manipulate and lie helped him conceal the truth. Unaware that the murderer was among them, people in the town remained vigilant, trying to figure out who was responsible for these terrible murders. Meanwhile, Thomas continued his macabre activities, hunting down more innocent victims, and the traces of blood and suffering continued to draw more suspicions towards him. As the number of victims grew, one of the teachers, Mrs. Thompson, noticed odd behaviors among her students. Thomas, who had been quiet and introverted, began showing an unhealthy interest in the occult and macabre stories. It troubled her deeply. Mrs. Thompson was an exceptional figure in the town. From a young age, she was interested in science and discovering new things. Her curiosity and passion for knowledge turned her into a talented scientist. After acquiring the necessary education and scientific titles, she decided to pursue a career in research and discovery. However, despite her dedication to science, Mrs. Thompson had always loved children. Their sincerity and curiosity about the world inspired her. She wanted to help young minds explore the world and develop their potential. This love for children led her to take up additional work as a primary school teacher. As she spent time with the children, she won their hearts. Mrs. Thompson became a favorite teacher among the students, as well as a support and friend to many. Her ability to explain difficult scientific concepts in a simple way, and her commitment to nurturing students' talents, made her indispensable to the school community. One of the teachers who recognized Mrs. Thompson's uniqueness was Mr. Davis, a history teacher who shared her passion for teaching. They spent a lot of time together, sharing their experiences and dreams. Their shared interests and fascination with teaching led to a budding romance between them. Their love story developed slowly but intensely. They were a source of support for each other and marveled at each other's presence every day. They were planning to get married soon, and the entire town was looking forward to the big celebration. However, as Mrs. Thompson began to notice suspicious behaviors in Thomas's notebook, her feelings toward the student became mixed with fears and anxieties. Unaware of his macabre second nature, she tried to understand why the boy seemed so distant and full of anger. One day, Mrs. Thompson stumbled upon a lead. While analyzing Thomas's notebook, she found horrifying drawings of the crimes that had shaken the town. In shock, she realized that one of the murders had taken place shortly after Thomas visited the library, where he read about heinous crimes from the past. Mrs. Thompson found herself in Thomas's apartment, trying to understand what could have driven such a talented student to commit such cruel acts. Going through his notebook, she made a shocking discovery. The pages were filled with terrifying precision, containing descriptions of planned future murders that had not yet occurred. One page described the exact murder of the town's veterinarian, Dr. Williams, set to take place over the upcoming weekend. Troubled and frightened, Mrs. Thompson felt time was running out to prevent another tragedy. She decided to inform the police and share her discovery, even though she feared that someone so close to her students could have such macabre plans. When she reported her suspicions, however, no one believed the story of future crimes found in the notebook. It seemed too improbable and fantastic to be believed. The police focused on investigating the previous murders and dismissed the predictions in the notebook. Unfortunately, a few days later, a gruesome murder of the veterinarian occurred in his office, exactly as described in the notebook. Mrs. Thompson was horrified that she hadn't been able to prevent the tragedy she had foreseen. She felt helpless and blamed herself for failing to convince anyone to take the notebook seriously. Another entry in the notebook described the dark fate of Mr. Smith, the local gardener. It depicted him found dead at the edge of the forest, tied to a tree. Mrs. Thompson immediately informed the police again, but was once more ignored. A few days later, news reports confirmed that Mr. Smith had been found in the exact manner described in the notebook. For Mrs. Thompson, it was another painful moment that solidified her belief that she had to find a way to uncover the secrets lurking in Thomas's mind. She realized that Thomas's past had roots in his difficult childhood and the traumatic events that shaped him. She wanted to discover the reasons that led him to become a murderer. Uncertain if Thomas was truly responsible for the crimes, Mrs. Thompson began conducting a private investigation that could lead her to the most horrifying truth she could ever expect. Mrs. Thompson refused to believe that a young child could be responsible for such cruel acts. However, as she learned more about Thomas's past, her feelings were intertwined with fear and suspicion. She felt compelled to act. Gathering evidence, she discovered that the more she delved into Thomas's past, the more she feared his reaction to her suspicions. After Mrs. Thompson reported the future crimes described in Thomas's notebook, the atmosphere in the town became tense and full of suspicion. The police, having no other leads, closely monitored the teacher, suspecting her involvement in the mysterious murders. Quickly, rumors and whispers spread like wildfire, leaving the town in a state of paranoia. People who once admired Mrs. Thompson for her dedication to her students and passion for learning now turned away from her with fear and suspicion. The community was convinced that the teacher was involved in the gruesome murders, and what had seemed impossible before was now deemed plausible in their eyes. Mrs. Thompson became a subject of distrust and paranoia. As she walked the streets, she could feel the stares full of fear and suspicion, making her feel like a condemned outcast. She was lonely, with no one she could trust. No matter how hard she tried to prove her innocence, the traces of suspicion remained. She hoped to uncover the truth about Thomas and reveal his macabre plans to regain the town's trust and clear her name. But the path ahead seemed increasingly futile and dangerous. When Mrs. Thompson finally discovered the truth about Thomas, she decided to take a desperate step and confront him directly. She chose to meet the boy in secret, not revealing her plans to anyone. The teacher felt she couldn't wait for the police to act, as another innocent life was at stake. The meeting took place in an abandoned building, where the atmosphere was tense and filled with horror. Mrs. Thompson looked at Thomas with a sharpened determination in her eyes. The boy, though somewhat surprised by her presence, showed no signs of remorse or guilt. Thomas suddenly lunged at Mrs. Thompson, trying to overpower her, but the teacher was more determined than ever. She repelled his attacks and confronted him with a courage he hadn't expected from an adult. Their struggle lasted for long moments, filled with screams, powerful strikes, and desperate attempts at dominance. Ultimately, Mrs. Thompson gained the upper hand. She used her experience and intelligence to subdue Thomas and deprive him of the opportunity to continue his macabre mission. Witnessing the teacher triumph over the young murderer was moving, but her victory was short-lived. The police suddenly burst into the building, having been informed about the meeting. When they saw Mrs. Thompson tying up Thomas, everyone present was shocked. A brief commotion followed, and then the teacher was arrested. The people in the town still couldn't believe her innocence, and the discovery in Thomas's notebook was interpreted as evidence of her guilt. Mrs. Thompson tried to defend herself, explaining what she had uncovered about Thomas and how she had tried to stop his madness. However, her words fell on deaf ears, as prejudices and fear consumed the town. She was accused of killing a child and all the previous gruesome crimes. It was a sorrowful ending for the teacher who dedicated her life to others' well-being. Now she faced heinous charges, while Thomas, the true perpetrator of the entire nightmare, walked free because no one could believe a child could be so cruel. The town sank into darkness, and Mrs. Thompson was condemned to endure the public shame. Thomas could continue killing